All right, let's go ahead and get back to our current guest on the phone again. Our current guest tonight is Brad Mukulka. He is the head of the Southeast Michigan Ghost Hunting Society. And again, Brad, thank you so much for giving us some time here on your Saturday evening, talking to us about all your adventures. Sounds very interesting.
Yes, thank you, Pat. I'm passionate, as you can tell, about this. And there's one thing I would like to say, though, that we do this all year round, not just for October.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a full time. It's like a full-time job.
Oh yeah, it is, and it's a full-time job, and I'm not saying this in a bad way because I enjoy this, but it's also expensive. Because if you want to get any kind of evidence, you need the equipment, and the equipment costs money.
If we could talk about that, what type of equipment do you use and your group uses? Were some of the things that you use?
Well, we have 4 infrared cameras that record directly onto a DVD, and what's cool about that is each camera records its own file on the actual hard drive in the DVD, and the format is an AVI format, so you don't have to convert anything. You just basically download the AVI file from the hard drive on the DVR to any computer, and then you use Windows Media Player and watch it. We have tape recorders for EVP. We have EMF meters. My personal favorite that I use is a tri-field meter. We use right now like 4 kinds of EMF meters. We have EM pods, which they're ran by a battery, and they produce a electromagnetic field that the spirits can, if there's any spirits that wish to, can take the energy from the EM pods and manifest themselves or communicate with us easier or move things easier.
Interesting. Do you use any of these laser grid systems?
Yes, actually, we had a house that we did at, Pat, and it was, trying to think where it was at, I'm not sure, I think it was over by Flint a couple of years ago, and we had one of these laser grids in the upstairs hallway, and the hallway was not too long of a hallway, and it's always a good idea to have, if you have a laser grid, to have a video camera taping it, so if anything does break that field, you have evidence of it. Gotcha. Because it's easy to say, oh, these things, there's something just came into this grid. Well, if you have video camera, you have proof. And that's the whole thing, is getting proof of the existence. So we were in this house in Flint, and probably about an hour and a half into the actual investigation, you see not necessarily a shadow of a person going through the hallway, but you see the laser grids. Each dot on the grid, like 4 or 5 of them would go out, come back on. The ones beside it would go off, and come back on. The ones beside it would go off and come back on. So that means that some physical energy or some spirit was crossing this grid. And we actually have video of it too. So
now, you mentioned that you use infrared. Does the infrared pick up a lot more than just a standard digital type camera, a standard camera?
Yeah, the theory, Pat, is that the spirits reside in the spectrum of light that we cannot see. We personally have a say in that spirits are everywhere. You just can't see them because they're in a different, I don't know if I want to say different states, but they're in some place that we can't see. And the infrared, it sees that full spectrum or ultraviolet light that we can't see, but the cameras can pick up. It's the same way, Pat, that children and animals can see things that we can't see.
Right.
And I'll tell you a quick story. Our friend Linda, she had her sister had a newborn girl, and she already had like a 5 or 6 year old son. And Linda told us that her sister was walking down the hallway with clothes that she was either folding or washing, and her daughter was in her crib. She was only about 2 or 3 months old, and her son, who like I said was about 4 or 5, he was in the talking to her, And she goes, my sister went down the hallway past the room, and she heard her son ask her infant daughter, "What's it like on the other side? I forgot."
Wow.
And she goes, my sister freaked. She called me and says, "What is this about?" So if there's any evidence, if you will, of the afterlife, having the child asking what it's like on the other side, I forgot.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. When you do you use tools like Adobe Audition or Audacity or what have you to go through and review all your EVPs?
Yeah, I actually use actually use Adobe Audition, but there's also one I use is called Cool Wave, which is a little bit easier to use. It's not as hard.
Gotcha.
And yeah, and there's also one called Gold Wave that's free, and I use that more, I think, because it is a simple. You open up the file and play it. You don't have to. You still have where you can adjust the volume, take out hiss, take out noise, make it louder. But to me, a Gold Wave is just a little bit easier to use as far as the curve to learn how to use it is really easy.
Yeah, some of those, I know some of the tools like Adobe, you can do a lot with it, but you've got to, we use it here, of course, at the studio exclusively, but it takes a lot. I mean, there's always a new version. It always can do something more, but Audacity seems to be something that people are, some of the freeware that they grab and you can download it and use it.
Okay. Yeah, it's basically personal preference, and for me personally, the easier that I have to learn stuff, that's what I'm going to use.
Oh, I agree with you 1,000%. So you don't get frustrated trying to do stuff. Let's talk a little bit before we talk about some of your investigations, if it's okay. Let's talk about your books that you have out, and where can our listeners get your books from?
Well, I know that all three of them are available online, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If they're here in Michigan, I know that Barnes and Noble has them in the actual store, as well as online. Now, my current book is on a publisher called Schiffer Books, and if you go to their website, you can order it from there. But they actually encourage you to buy it from a bookstore first, if at all possible.
Right.
And then my first two books was by a company called Publish America, and you can buy them online there, or like I said, Amazon has them online, Barnes and Noble online has them. So basically, online would be the easiest.
And let's talk about your books. So that you have three of them out now currently,
Yes.
Brad?
Yes. Yeah, the first one is called I Am Ghost Hunter, and that basically follows, that was written in '06, and that follows our first 10 years, actually, of investigations. And I basically take you on the investigations. From the time that we arrive on site to anything that, odd that happened during the investigation to when we actually left. And I think there was like 10 investigations, if I remember correctly. Book 2 is called Spook House, and I had mentioned earlier is about our time in a haunted house. We were only there for about 3 or 4 months, and we did move because of the activity, but it wasn't anything where it was like you see on TV where they attacked us or blood came down the wall. It was more, Mom said that she got tired of not knowing what was going to happen next.
Right.
And then my third book is called Ghost Hunting in Michigan. And that actually came out August 28th on Schiffer Books. And that follows our next 10 years, basically, of investigations. And it takes us to graveyards. If you know Jeff Daniels,
Yes.
the actor, he has a theater in Chelsea called the Purple Rose Theater. And we were actually fortunate enough to investigate the Purple Rose Theater.
Interesting.
Jeff wasn't there, unfortunately, but we did investigate it, and the book tells you what we found there. And we did a private house, and we did the prison in Mansfield, and we did a couple of graveyards, and then, of course, the whole haunting on Hamilton Street.
One of our listeners wrote in a question and said, Brad, by any chance, have you ever had an opportunity or have talked to anybody to see if there's any extra or paranormal activity that takes place at the Grand Hotel up at Mackinac Island?
Well, Pat, here is that's actually a good question. The problem that we have, or I find, is people, especially businesses, don't want to be known as being haunted.
Right.
They think that, on the contrary, it might help business, but they don't. They think that if they are told to be haunted, that people are going to stay away. They don't want to be known as a haunted place. We have found resistance if we try to get into a place to do an investigation. That they mentioned that there's a spirit or two in the building. Granted, a lot of times we have encouragement. Oh yeah, this happened. If you guys want to come out, sure, go ahead. Well, there's other places where you talk to them about, hey, can we maybe come out and do an investigation? No, not interested. Thank you, bye. And I think the Grand Hotel would fall in that category, just because we have been up there many times, and they actually offer up there now. They offer a haunted Mackinac Island tour.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, we were just up there. We're actually going to go up there the next weekend, actually, but we were there in June, and they have in the stores there on Mackinac Island, they have advertisements. Oh, take the haunted Mackinac Island tour. Meet here, blah blah blah. But I think because the Grand Hotel is such a prestigious hotel and like a world class hotel, I think that they would keep any stories about paranormal quiet.
I can imagine. It is a beautiful place. I was there when I was young, and I would like to return there again. It's like stepping back in time.
And Pat, this is one place. Mackinac Island is one place that you can honestly say, if you've ever been there in 20, 30 years, it hasn't changed.
Really?
Yes. There's no cars allowed. Still, you either get around by walking, horses, or bikes, and they still have great fudge.
Very, very.
I love their place.
Have you ever been out, something I think a lot of people don't know unless you live up in those areas, but, when you go up to northern Michigan, out to the east of Michigan, there's islands out there that people live on.
Yes.
Several islands. Have you ever gone out there and done any ghost hunting or paranormal research on any of those small populated islands?
No, actually, Pat, we haven't. We just basically stayed in the state of Michigan, on the land part of it, obviously. And that's about it. We haven't really thought about doing any of the small islands.
Interesting. Yeah, so much to Michigan that people don't realize.
Oh, exactly. And to make a point, a lot of times we go places, and we go up there not to look for ghosts or spirits, but they have a tendency to find us.
Interesting.
Case in point, we love going up to Traverse City, and they used to have a state hospital up there, and it was closed a long time ago. One of the buildings, Building 50, it was converted into the first level is small shops, and this to me is so cool. The upper part of the state hospital they turned into condominiums.
Wow!
I would love to live up there. That would be so cool. But we were walking. We were up there in April, and we were walking down a hallway, and I was up in the front. My daughter, our son, and then my wife Brenda was behind us. And I looked behind me to make sure that they were still behind me, and I saw this black shadow coming up behind Brenda. And the first thought that came to my mind was, oh, well, okay, this guy's in a hurry. I took like 2 steps. I looked back. He was gone.
Wow.
So we had someone following us as a family, and we weren't trying to find ghosts. We were just up there, nice family, vacation, and we're shopping, and the spirits found us.
Interesting. Very interesting. Do you have with your organization? Do you use any? Well, a couple questions. First of all, do you use any psychics or mediums, and do you have any relationships with clergy people that help you with things?
Well, we as far as the mediums, we do have a couple. I am one actually, and I think that, and then my wife is also one, and our daughter seems to have the ability. I think if she opens up herself, she would be a great person to communicate with the spirits. And I think that's why, I think that's what, for us, Pat, is that we offer a service that most groups can't. Not only can we go into an investigation, let's say a house, and it has to be a two-way street. If the spirits aren't communicating with you, you're not going to talk with them, plain and simple. The conversation stops, right? Right there. But if the spirits are willing to communicate with you, you can tell the homeowner who's here, how they passed, and you can help them cross over. And as far as clergy, we don't really work with clergy. We honestly, we haven't really found a need to, as far as the kind of spirits that we have encountered. We haven't encountered anything, demonic or evil in that sense.
So not where you really needed, because I know that's something I hear so many times. They need to bring a clergy person in to help somebody move to the light or move on or move out if they're causing trouble.
But see, the only problem with that, though, Pat, is that if the spirit didn't believe in God when he was alive,
right,
he doesn't believe in God now.
Very true.
And the whole Hollywood thing, when the priest comes in, in the name of Jesus Christ, leave this house, and they do the holy water. Technically, that's not going to work if they don't believe in God.
Right.
Or if they, for some reason, they hate the church, they had a bad experience with the church, or whatever, whatever the case might be, they're not going to leave. If anything, that could actually make things worse.
Very
because
true.
Before you had a spirit who was just there, causing a little bit of mischief, whatever. Now you have a spirit who's mad because you tried to make him leave.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. The you mentioned, I think earlier we talked about demonic things.
Yes.
Through your career of doing this, have you run into anything very bad or demonic or things that are a little bit over the top?
The only thing that we have ever come across, Pat, as far as that, is we had a house in Grass Lake, and this was about 3 or 4 years ago, and this was cool in itself. It used to be an old funeral home, and if you went upstairs to the homeowner's bedroom, right off of her bedroom was the embalming room, and
wow.
There was actually an elevator that worked that took the bodies from the basement up to the embalming room. And that was cool in itself, just being an old funeral home. That was cool. But we use, and whether or not you use these and believe in these, it's a person's personal choice. We have had some experience, but we have a program that is on a tablet called the iOculus, and we had some of our people downstairs, and she calls up and says, "Brad, you need to come down here." I'm like, what's happening? I'm upstairs, and she says, the iOculus, the software, which is supposedly to allow the spirits to talk through the oculus, and they form words that you can hear and understand, kind of like a real-time EVP session. Well, she said that it's called your name twice. It says Brad twice, Brad and Brad. So I went downstairs, and as soon as I walked downstairs, I felt like there was like 3 spirits that were just surrounding me, and it would be like a person, like a child being bullied on a playground. I had like 3, I couldn't see them, but I could sense them, 3 spirits around me, and they're like taunting me. And I don't scare easily. I've been doing this a long time. I'm a big person. I don't scare easily. I had to leave the basement just because I felt like I was being drained of my energy. So I left, and when I was going up the stairs to go back upstairs to the first floor, I heard somebody on the steps behind me. And I assumed that it was one of our group members coming up with me. So I looked behind me. There wasn't anybody there. So I went upstairs, and our friend Linda, she's a medium, and she moved to Florida about 10 years ago. So I called her up. I'm like, yeah, Linda, this is what's going on. It's your old funeral home. It was empty for a long time. Just had experience in the basement. What do you think? And she goes, it sounds like to me, she goes, that I'm getting this feeling or the sensation that someone was doing black magic in the basement of this funeral home when it was empty. And she says, what you are feeling is the spirits that were conjured up by this black magic. So, okay, well, great, kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going back downstairs. Is there anything that I can do? She goes, try to see if you can find the portal, which is like an opening to the other world, and see if you can close it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing that I can offer, right now. I'm like, okay, cool. So I went back downstairs, and as soon as I went back downstairs again, I could feel those same three spirits like converging on me. And the long story short, I found the portal in my mind. I closed it, and they hadn't had any problem since.
Very interesting. What do you think about? And we got a couple of questions emailed in about this. What do you think about? What's your feelings, Brad, on Ouija boards?
Don't use them.
Good answer.
They
Tell us why.
they are advertised, Pat, as games. Contact the spirit world. Okay, the only problem is this, plain and simple, and this is like no joking, no kidding around. A spirit just needs an invitation to come in, okay? By you using the Ouija board, and you put your hands on that, placette or placette, whatever it's called. If there's anybody here, move this. That is their invitation right there. And unless you are a psychic or a medium, and you know what's coming across, and you can close that portal, you have no control of what comes across. And 90% of the time, what comes across is not good.
Interesting.
Not good at all.
Do you ever use them?
No.
Because I understand some people do use them for paranormal work.
Yes. We don't, Pat, just because myself included, we can communicate with the spirits without the Ouija board. But you got to be careful, because also people use what's called a pendulum,
mm-hmm.
which is hanging a crystal off of a chain, and that is essentially the same thing as a Ouija board. You are inviting the spirits to move this pendulum or this crystal to make their presence known. But it's the same thing. You're inviting the spirits in.
Very interesting. So you tell a good warning to children, especially or young teens out there that think they're having fun with these things. Obviously, sometimes you can play with them and nothing will happen, and other times you you may get the added bonus for free and wish you never did.
Exactly. And one other thing too, Paz, I should say about Ouija boards is a lot of times and I'm not going to call them spirits because they're generally not spirits. Whatever comes across will try to disguise themselves to you. So that they might say, oh, I'm your grandma that has passed. But they're not really your grandma. They're trying to trick you into speaking to them, but they're not really your grandma. Case in point, Pat, we had an investigation once in a house in Ypsilanti. And we were basically called out there because her son would take her two daughters, go into his room, close the door. And they'd be giggling and laughing, the whole thing. And the homeowner, I can say her name because they actually moved out of state, Christine would say, my kids are in there playing, they're having a high old time. I open the door, and it's just them three in there. So finally I'm like, guys, who are you guys playing with? I'm hearing you guys talking. Who are you guys playing with? And her son goes, oh, Mom, it's Grandpa. Grandpa has been dead for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the spirit that was in their house was impersonating their grandfather who had died 10 years ago. and he was trying to get them to trust him as being Grandpa, but he wasn't Grandpa. And then also that same house, to make a point about not inviting the spirits in, we had cleaned the house with incense, holy water. And I told Christine, I'm like, okay, it's not uncommon when we clean the house, the first couple of days you might still have some spirit residue energy in the house. It's to be expected. If after 3 or 4 days you're still having activity, call us and we'll come back and see, what is here. Well, she said about 3 o'clock in the morning, she heard on her bedroom window and outside wall, like small pebbles hitting her house. She's like, who the heck is out here at 3 o'clock in the morning throwing pebbles at my house? And she goes, she gets out of bed and she hears a voice that says, Christine, open the door, let me in. And she remembered what I told her about don't let anybody in. They might try to come back in. She goes, I remembered what you said. I didn't open the door. She says, we have not had one lick of problem since. And I'm like, good. You heard me. Congratulations.
One thing that I've heard a few times, Brad. I've interviewed a lot of people, a lot of guests, and both researchers and people that have had things affect them. In your years of doing this, have you ever come across somebody, or your group, have they ever come across somebody where, I guess the easiest way for me to state this is somebody that feels they've sold their soul to the devil, if you want to call it that, and now are tired of that and want to be out of that situation? Case in point, we had one guest on the show who basically was having a real bad string of bad luck, and went through many different things and pretty much said, I'm here, and again, I'm kind of wrapping this up in a nutshell, but I'm more than willing to do whatever I need to do to get ahead, and things seem to change for him, and his life did change entirely, and when it was all done and said, he wanted that out of his life because he felt that, again, in real simple terms, he sold himself to somebody else and was trying to get away from that.
Oh, wow. No, we actually haven't had anything like that. The only thing that we had similar was the house in Ypsilanti. She had lost like 3 children in a row. So she thought maybe whatever was in the house was causing her to lose her children before they were actually born, kind of thing. But as far as someone that has, sold their soul or whatever, we haven't, come across that yet.
Interesting. Very interesting. Welcome back to Fringe Radio. Brad is here from Southeast Michigan Ghost Hunter Society. Go check out their website at www.scmghs.org. And the 3 books that he has out, his most recent one is called Ghost Hunting in Michigan. His other book is called Spook House and I Am Ghost Hunter. Again, Brad, thank you so much for being here. With just going through the website, the thing that interests me was the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia. What happened in there?
Well, it wasn't per se an investigation. We had gone to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to find the Mothman.
Oh, okay.
Couldn't find him. Couldn't find him. So we were heading to a Gettysburg, and our vacations aren't like point A to point B. We go from like point A to a cemetery to a haunted place, and then point C. Well, Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was on our way, so we stopped there and we took the half-hour tour, was turned into an hour-and-a-half tour. Our tour guide, he heard me talking about being paranormal, hunting ghosts, and all that kind of stuff, and he's like, I want to take you on the tour. And there was one room, there was a girl that had passed away. She was like 12 years old, and her spirit is still there. And there was a small stuffed animal that was on the windowsill. And he had just gotten through with a tour, and he took us to her room, and the stuffed animal was now on the floor. And he goes, well, that's odd. And we're like, what? Yeah, his name was actually Patrick. I was like, Patrick, what's odd about that? He was like, that stuffed animal was on the windowsill when I closed the door on the last tour. And he goes, I don't know how it moved. I don't understand how it moved. And there was 2 or 3 spots in the buildings where we could sense some kind of spirit energy there. And it's just a wonderful place. It's a huge, huge building.
They do tours there. It's open for investigators to go through.
Well, I know around Halloween, October-ish, they do offer overnight investigations. And I'm not for sure if it's the whole year or not, but I know for sure they have it in October. They have overnight investigations. And then if you're there during the daytime, you can actually take either a half hour, an hour and a half, or a 2-hour tour.
Ah, okay. Very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about Gettysburg.
Oh, I love that place.
Give me your thoughts on that.
Well, it's the whole theory of if you pass away quickly, your spirit is going to stay there. That place is ripe for spirits because you had over 3 days, 50,000 casualties, either killed, wounded, or MIA. And a lot of the rock in Gettysburg is granite, and that's been known to absorb energy. So just in that facts alone, the place has to have a lot of spirits. And we actually had an experience with that. Our first time there, we stayed at the Cashtown Inn. And the Cashtown Inn is a B&B now, but back in the day, it was General Lee's headquarters on June 30th.
Mm-hmm.
When they came from Cashtown to the west and they marched into town, they actually marched past the Cashtown Inn. And General Lee actually stayed there on June 30th. So I'm assuming his other generals were also there. Well, we were there and we checked in, and the inn owners, their son Scott, and Scott was there, and he goes, "Oh, you're the first guest that have checked in." Like, "Oh, cool." So he took us upstairs to our room, and we're staying outside of our room, and there was a room about maybe 20 feet away, and I'm like, "Okay, Scott, I have to ask you, dude, is this place haunted?" And he goes, "Well, we don't like to advertise that it's haunted because it scares the potential guest. But since you asked, I'll tell you some of the things that have happened." I'm like, "Oh, cool, thanks, Scott." So he's telling us a few things that have happened, and all 3 of us from this far room, about 20, 25 feet away, we all 3 of us, me, Brenda, the wife, and Scott, we heard 2 men talking in this room. Like, clearly, we couldn't understand what was being said, but we could hear 2 men's voices. And Scott goes, "Well, that's odd." I'm like, "What is, Scott?" He goes, like, "You 2 are the first guests to check in. There's no one else up here but you guys." So we stood there for a second. We could still hear them talking. They're out, clearly having a conversation. So he walks over there, knocks on the door, housekeeping, still talking. Again, housekeeping, still 2 men talking. Housekeeping, I have the key, I'm coming in. He puts his key in the lock, turns the lock, opens the door, the voices stop. He checks the room, there's nobody in that room.
Wow.
And he comes out and he goes, "Well, chalk that up to one of our stories. 2 men talking, there's no one in that room."
Interesting. At Gettysburg, one thing that a lot of people talk about, I've heard this on many occasions, is people thinking that they're seeing reenactments of soldiers coming across the field, and then they turn around and look, and there's nothing there. I seem to hear quite a bit about that. Is that something that you've experienced, or know of people that have experienced that, where they're seeing a reenactment of something of the past?
Yeah, I have heard there's like 3 or 4 spots on the actual battlefield itself where I have heard stories about that, where people have seen people around a campfire, or seen people on horses, or hear cannonballs being fired, or rifles being fired. I have heard stories about that also. personally haven't experienced anything, and I think, Pat, and I think this is a good time too, is you can't, you can't turn on and off the spirit activity that you may encounter. I believe it's like everything has to be in place. You have to be open to experiencing this stuff before it happens. And I think that if anybody gets like an apparition, a full body apparition, partial apparition on camera or on video, personally, I think it's by accident. I think that you were just lucky enough to catch them at that time.
Yeah, wanting for something to happen and probably having something happen are two complete different things. And I assume a lot of people, when they get into this, they get let down. But probably when you let your guard down and you're more open to helping people and seeking the truth on these things, that's when the things present themselves to you.
Yeah, I think that if you go into a spot expecting, hoping to see something, I think you're going to be very disappointed because you probably won't experience anything.
Right.
On the other side, if you go into a place with open mind, well, whatever happens, happens. I think you're more apt to have an experience. And we were actually there. We were actually there in May, but we were there 2 years ago. And this is really cool as far as EVP wise. I was just above the fence line in Triangle Field. If you're not familiar with the actual battle, day 2, when the Confederates were coming from the Peach Orchard through Devil's Den up to Round Top, there's a place just between the Devil's Den and the Triangular Field. I'm sorry, the Peach Orchard. That is just a field, and it's shaped like a triangle, and it's called Triangular Field. And there was day 2, a lot of battle, a lot of casualties in this one area. Well, I was above the actual fence. I wasn't in the field. I was just past the field, and I have my EVP tape recorder running, and I have a camera. And I'm like, okay, flash, and take a picture. I turn, flash, and take a picture. I didn't hear anything. I wasn't expecting to hear anything. So when I got back to our hotel, I'm sitting there and I put on my headphones and I'm playing back my EVP session. And you hear me say flash, and you hear the camera go, select flash. And then about 5 seconds later, you hear a voice. It's a raspy voice. And the voice says, "Am I buried?"
Wow.
And I'm like, did I just hear that? So I played it back. And I listened closely. And I said, you hear flash. And then you hear, "Am I buried?" I'm like, that made my whole day.
Yeah. It's like catching a fish. You caught one.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We've got just a little bit of time left, Brad. I'd like to, on Discovery now, you and your group, you did an episode called A Haunting, or you did something with a show. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. We were in 2006, and they had contacted us to if we had any investigations that might be interesting enough to be on TV. And we had done an investigation in a house in a Pontiac, and we told them what had happened, in emails, and then they finally decided, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and set this whole thing up. So they actually came to our house, and they went to the homeowner's house first. Then they came to our house, and they were, and this is just to show you what it takes to put on a hour TV show. But if you figure when you have commercials, it's only about a 45-minute TV show. But they were at our house for 10 hours. They interviewed us, me, Brenda, and one of the other persons from our group. And each of our interview sessions took an hour and a half. And then they had to spend an hour in between each interview session to set up the house for the interview session. So they had the cameras, the lighting, the TV monitors, the on-site director, the cameraman, the audio guy. And basically they took, because Ray, who was the on-site director, he's like, we're not here for the investigation, so you need to tell us what happened so we can, basically make a script out of what happens from you guys. So yeah, that's fine. So after a 10-hour day, which was very tiring actually, because during the interviews we couldn't talk, we couldn't move, we couldn't do anything. So the whole thing was filmed, and it aired in September of 2006. It's actually on reruns. We have DirecTV, and there's a channel called Destination America, and they have a lot of the haunting episodes, and ours was just on 2 weekends ago. It's called The Attic, and it's basically about our investigation that we had done in this house in the Pontiac, and everything that happened on the show actually happened at the investigation.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. That seems
I was going to say too, Pat, was they made me wear blush, and a camera does add 10 pounds to your face. I look like I'm a blimp, but I fought Ray over the blush because you have to have blush on, Brad. I'm like, Ray, I'm not wearing makeup, dude. Because you have to wear, you are reflecting off the lights. I'm like, Ray, I'm not wearing makeup. And he goes, do you want to be on TV? I'm like, I'm wearing makeup.
There you go. He had the last word.
Exactly.
Well, in wrapping up here, Brad, what do you guys have going on? Of course, Halloween is just around the corner, and a lot of people always associate October and Halloween with this. But again, it's something that you do all the time. It's a full-time thing. What do you and your group having coming up over the next, let's say, next couple of months, next 6 months? What's on the chalkboard for you?
Well, usually, Pat, during October, we usually have investigations in coordination with TV interviews and paper interviews. This year, October, we're doing a little bit different. We're strictly promoting my last book. I'm doing 4 presentations this month. We're actually doing another radio interview in Port Huron on October 15th. So if any listeners are in the Port Huron area, it'll be in the morning on October 15th. And basically, we actually shut down, Pat, for November and December. We used to do investigations, but it feels weird doing investigations when people have their trees up and the Christmas presents. It didn't feel right. So we basically shut down November and December. And then in those months when we're not shut down, we're still looking for investigations for January. And we'll start back up again in January. And then next year, 2016, will be our 20th anniversary. So as a group, so we'll find some place to do an investigation that we haven't been to before, and we'll set up the investigation and go and do our investigation.
Sounds very good. Well, I want to thank you, Brad, for taking the time to be with us here again. It was an honor to have you on. I'd like to get you back on down the road again as you continue to pick up new stuff, and I can tell that you live it, and I can tell the passion in your voice for what you're doing. And again, the best of luck with your latest book. Again, for the listeners, Brad has 3 books, one called I Am Ghost, I Am Ghost Hunter, the other one is called Spook House, and his latest and greatest book released this year is called Ghost Hunting in Michigan. And again, I've had a lot of different guests on from different parts of the country that write books about their specific areas. And again, Michigan is such a beautiful state, but so many interesting things going on. Encourage people to go ahead and pick the book up, take a look at it, and find out about some of the things that are happening.
Yeah, I'm actually starting a book 4. Actually, as we speak, I have a few chapters already, and I want to thank you, Pat, for having me on. I absolutely had a ball.
All right, my friend. Well, you take care. Have a happy Halloween and happy holidays again, and let's stay in touch and get you back on again.
Yes. Yeah, please do it. I absolutely enjoy this whole, and the 2 hours went by so fast.
Always does. Always does. It goes too quick. All right, Brad. Have a great week, and God bless you. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, Pat. Thank you very much.
Take care. Good night.